Hey guys, maybe you watched a night movie once, fell in love with chainmail, and decided you were born in the wrong century. Let's quickly correct that illusion. Tonight, we're peeling back the moldy wool curtain on a time of illness, contentment, and deeply disappointing breakfasts. This isn't your fairy tale Middle Ages. No dragons, no noble quests, just endless mud, public defecation, and the subtle aroma of human misery. Welcome to a world where you don't live and you endure. And frankly, you wouldn't make it past lunch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes. There's no clock, no alarm, just the church bell, a long repeating clang, battering your skull like someone hammering modern vertebrae straight into your brainstem. Congratulations, you've woken up in Europe. The year is 1324, not in a castle, not in a manor house with embroidered tapestries and lavender-scented candles. You're in a hut, straw-roofed, mouldy, with a wool blanket so heavy it could pass for livestock, unwashed through 4 winters. And judging by the smell, something, or someone, has just urinated in the corner of your straw mattress. This is not the image Hollywood tried to sell you. No gleaming knights on white horses. No charming noblemen offering embroidered handkerchiefs to blushing ladies. No lantern-lit feasts or courtly dances. What you have instead is organized inconvenience, institutionalized poverty, and a thriving community of insects you didn't invite and cannot evict. You thought you liked history, right up until you had to live in it. Welcome to the Middle Ages. And the first thing you need to understand is this. No one here wants to be ordinary, because ordinary means you're a living tool, here to serve the land, the Lord, and the people quite literally living above you. There is no clean water. There are no painkillers. There is no personal freedom. Life here is dictated by 3 forces: the weather, the church, and chronic, irreversible back pain. You live in a village. The name of the village is irrelevant. It could be anything that ends in ham, ford, or witch. Population: 120 humans, 600 fleas, 3 pigs currently losing their minds from worms, and 1 literate monk, the only person the village believes can communicate with God, or at the very least with the tax ledger. No glass windows, no private bed. Your family, which includes your parents, 4 siblings, 2 chickens, and a goat, sleeps on the dirt floor. No toilet, just a wooden bucket, or, if you're lucky, a shallow pit behind the barn. You do not look into that pit at night, not because of ghosts, but because of rats, real ones. You're 23 years old. You've already lost 3 teeth. There's a suspicious blotch on your thigh that never goes away, and a growing suspicion that you will not survive the coming winter. You have no medical records. You have a local healer. He once fixed a broken leg by pulling hard and quoting the gospel. He is also the village barber, and the man who once dissected a pig. If you thought living in this time period would be a journey of whimsical discovery, I'm sorry. You're not going to discover anything except the limits of your own endurance. You will not travel unless conscripted, or sold to a brothel in town. You will not learn to read, unless you're born a nobleman's son or accidentally hide in a monastery and stumble upon a poorly copied Latin Vulgate. Everything you eat is grey. Everything you wear itches, and everyone around you is coughing. Someone is always coughing. Maybe they're dying. Maybe it's just mold. Probably both. You don't ask. Because asking means not working. Not working means not eating. And not eating means you become compost for someone else's potatoes. You're not dead, but you're not exactly alive either. You exist. Inside an inescapable loop of labor, hunger, cold, illness, and belief, sometimes in God, sometimes in rain falling at the right time. You make no future plans. You simply hope today's fever doesn't escalate, and that the local baron's dog doesn't wander into your yard and flatten your only chicken. Ever thought of starting a new life? Good. But you don't have a passport. You don't have a horse. You don't have an email address. You have one wool shirt. You wear it until it dissolves or until someone dies and you inherit theirs. All life improvements are tied to the death of someone else. That's not a proverb. That's the asset distribution system. This is the Middle Ages. Not a game, not a romantic novel. This is the era where no one controls their own life, yet everyone thinks they can control the universe with prayer and chicken bones. And here you are, no tools, no skills, no immunity. Welcome to your first, and possibly last day in human history, where your first lesson is this: you won't survive here because you were never designed to, and this story has only just begun. Congratulations, you've made it out of your straw-scented slumber in the year 1325, and now it's time to start the day. Don't get optimistic. The first thing you see is not sunlight pouring through a window, because, spoiler alert, there is no window. Instead, there's a gap in the wooden wall that only makes itself known when freezing wind or the rich aroma of livestock feces seeps straight into your brain. Welcome to the concept of home in the Middle Ages. They call it a house, but you'll soon realize it's just a hut that hasn't collapsed yet. Structure? Rough timber hacked from the nearest forest, lashed together with rope, mud, or vague hope in a regional forest deity. The roof is made of straw or thatch, styled somewhere between expired bird's nest and a wig left in the rain. Its insulation rivals that of a pasta strainer. In winter, it's a meat freezer. In summer, it becomes a communal crock-pot in which you and your family slow boil in sweat and the artisanal musk of the era. Size? Just enough for you, your wife, 3 children, 1 goat, 2 chickens, and a cousin who never leaves, to all sleep in a space slightly larger than a wardrobe. No bedrooms, no living rooms, just the area. The living room is where you sleep. The bedroom is where you give birth. The dining room is where you step in chicken droppings in the dark. All of this is elegantly layered over a cracked dirt floor, straw covered if you're lucky, or just the honest company of cold mud and compost older than you are. Curious about the bathroom situation? Don't be naive. If you're a peasant, the toilet is whatever patch of ground behind the house hasn't been claimed by someone else that day. If it rains, everything you flushed comes back, quietly sliding into the house through the floor cracks. Perhaps this is nature's way of teaching you about the water cycle. Daylight comes in through an unglazed vent hole, and at night you're lit by fish oil lamps, or more precisely, a tin can of burning pig fat. The smoke clings to everything, especially your lungs. People believed it kept demons away. Realistically, it just kept you awake and coughing until the bacteria could finish what they started. You're wondering if the house has furniture. Possibly. Most of it is made of whatever didn't burn last winter. A stump might be a chair, a table, and the step stool you stand on when hunting rats under your bed. The bed, if you insist on calling it that, is a wooden frame with crisscrossed rope for springs and a fermenting haystack on top. The blanket is wool, rough as tree bark and heavy as existential despair. The scent of the house? A signature blend of animal waste, fireplace smoke, human sweat, damp grass, mildew, and something foot-like you can't quite place. The only perfume is crushed garlic, worn on a string to ward off evil. No idea if it works on spirits, but it's very effective at repelling neighbors. Not nauseous yet? Be patient. It's coming. You might be thinking, at least they had a strong sense of family. They did, because the home was so cramped that if you stretched your legs, you'd knee someone's jaw. Privacy was a myth. You'd sleep, eat, give birth, die, and maybe be buried all in the same square of dirt, under the silent gaze of your entire household. That's why people lived fast, loved quickly, and whispered everything. If you were born into the lower class, which you are. You didn't choose a house. The house chose you. You inherited it or built it yourself with the only tools you had, calloused hands and reluctant acceptance. We like to say, a house is a home. Here, it's literally a nest, featuring straw, feathers, and crawling organisms. If you were dreaming of a stone manor with stained glass windows and red brick hearths, I'm sorry. You're living in the wrong century. Conclusion for this section? Your house isn't where you rest. It's where you try not to die. And you've got 14 more chapters of historical hell to go. Welcome to the Middle Ages. No escape. Welcome to the bathroom chapter of your medieval experience. It will be quick. Not because the information is short, but because you'll want to stop listening halfway through. Let's begin with a fun fact. The term bathroom didn't exist. Neither did restroom, powder room, or even privacy. What you had, if you were lucky, was a wooden bucket, an outhouse, or just the wide open world, and a loose interpretation of shame. If you were a peasant, your toilet was probably a corner behind your house, or, more accurately, the same corner your neighbor used yesterday and the goats used this morning. The only formality involved was yelling, "Gardez l'eau," Old French for watch out for the water, before tossing your waste onto the street. Did people move in time? Number? That's why medieval towns smelled like a public latrine lit on fire. Urban planning, if you can call it that, didn't include sewage systems. Streets were open gutters. Literally. Imagine walking through your town in shoes made of stitched rags, trying not to step in the slow river of human excrement, horse manure, and things better left unnamed. The nose adjusts eventually. Your standards do not. Public toilets? Rare. If you found one, congratulations. It was a long wooden bench with holes cut out, placed directly over a pit, or sometimes just the river. You sat next to strangers. You didn't talk. You didn't breathe. And you certainly didn't ask why it was warm. If you lived in a castle, the experience wasn't exactly royal. You had what was called a garde-robe, a stone shaft sticking out of the wall, where waste dropped straight into the moat. You might think this was clever engineering until you realize attackers used the same chute to climb in. Yes, enemies entered the castle through the toilet. That's not strategy, that's biological warfare. And let's talk wiping. Toilet paper didn't exist, so what did you use? Straw, moss, a rag, maybe a smooth rock. If you were rich, perhaps a scrap of wool. If you were poor, your dignity. Many people just used their hand and then rinsed it, maybe, in a nearby stream. Do not shake hands with anyone from this century, ever. As for hygiene, well, it wasn't. Washing your hands after doing your business was not standard. It wasn't even advised. In fact, many people believed that water could carry disease, and in that, they were accidentally correct. Because the same stream you drank from was the one someone upstream just pooped next to. It was the great cycle of contamination. In towns, the air was thick with a smell you could chew, and in the countryside, the scent carried on the breeze. Indoor plumbing was centuries away. Even chamber pots, a medieval luxury, had to be emptied somewhere. And somewhere was usually out the nearest window. If you were female, privacy was an even bigger joke. No separate facilities, no sanitary products. Menstruation? You used cloth. If you had cloth, then you washed it, or didn't, and hoped for the best. There were no bins, no disposal, no understanding, just discomfort layered with social silence. Let's not forget disease. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, all common, all spread by bad sanitation. In short, if the rats didn't get you, the bacteria would. Every bowel movement was a biological gamble. You may be wondering, did people get used to it? Yes. In the same way people get used to being punched daily, they stopped complaining out loud. The bathroom wasn't a room, it was a ritual. A public humiliation repeated daily with an audience of chickens and, occasionally, strangers. So next time you complain about a gas station restroom, remember that once upon a time, there was no door, no flush, and your only option was to aim for the wind and pray for mercy. Congratulations, you've now survived the medieval toilet. Sort of. Wash your hands. Oh wait, there's no soap. Onward. You made it through the toilet episode. Barely. Now it's time for breakfast. You're probably hungry. That's unfortunate, because what you're about to eat is less of a meal and more of a medieval investigation into what qualifies as food. Let's start with the setting. There is no kitchen, just a smoky hearth that doubles as a heat source, a cooking space, and a hazard for toddlers. You crouch near the fire because there are no chairs. The bench is broken, the stool has fleas, and the floor is still wet from last night's rain, or something more sinister. Your meal? Pottage. Again. Always pottage. Pottage is not a dish. It's an ongoing biological experiment. Imagine a pot that has not been emptied for weeks. Every day, someone throws in more barley, more turnips, maybe a lonely bean. The result is a glue-like stew with the consistency of wet cement and the color of regret. It simmers indefinitely. Mold is scraped off the top and called seasoning. This is what you eat. Every single morning. It is not hot. It is lukewarm. But you convince yourself it's nourishing because the only alternative is starvation, which, to be fair, was also common. On the side, you have bread, not a fluffy sourdough, not a crusty baguette. This is rye bread, dark, dense, and roughly the weight of a paving stone. It contains flour, yes, but also sawdust, ground-up acorns, and the occasional pebble. Because wheat is expensive, and your teeth are already loose anyway. You do not slice this bread. You attack it, or soak it in your pottage until it becomes edible, or at least surrendering. Butter? Dream on. That's for feast days, and you're not in a feast. You're in an existential crisis shaped like a breakfast. What about eggs? Not unless you own chickens. And if you do, you sell the eggs. Eating them would be a waste of profit. Milk? Only if the cow cooperated this morning, which she didn't. She's sick, from the same water you drink. Speaking of which, no orange juice, no coffee, no tea unless you're rich. You drink ale, at 6 a.m. Yes, beer, because water is poison and everyone knows it. This isn't a party, this is survival. The ale is weak, but at least it's boiled. Your children drink it too. Nobody's drunk. Everybody's just resigned. If you're feeling fancy, you might smear some lard on your bread. That's considered indulgent. Lard, animal fat. If you're truly wealthy, which you're not, perhaps a lump of cheese. But most dairy spoils within hours, and fridges are a future myth. Sugar? Forget it. Salt? Maybe, if it hasn't been locked away by your lord. Pepper? Costs more than your annual wages. Literally. And let's not forget the rats, because they've been nibbling your pottage during the night. That explains the mysterious texture this morning. You eat it anyway, because what else are you going to do? Complain? To whom? God? He stopped answering breakfast complaints around 1262. The whole thing feels like a punishment disguised as a routine. You do not finish breakfast. Breakfast finishes you. So now you've eaten your thin broth, your stone loaf, your bitter ale, and a teaspoon of despair. You feel weak, tired, and mildly betrayed by the concept of food. Congratulations. You've survived breakfast in the Middle Ages, and you are still hungry. So, you've eaten breakfast, which mostly felt like punishment with a side of mold. Now it's time to get dressed. And by get dressed, I mean wrap your body in medieval torture disguised as fabric. Let's be clear. In 1325, fashion isn't about style. It's about survival. Barely. You have one outfit. Not one type of outfit. One. Singular. As in, the same tunic you wore yesterday, the day before that, and every day since the last harvest festival when you briefly considered washing it and then didn't. Why? Because washing it involves several stages of labor, pain, and existential regret. But we'll get there. First, the garment itself. If you're a man, you wear a tunic. If you're a woman, you wear a longer tunic. If you're a child, congratulations. You're in a tunic that used to belong to someone else. Maybe someone dead. Maybe someone still alive. It doesn't matter. Laundry isn't real. The material is wool. Always wool. Not the soft kind you pet at a craft fair. This is coarse, unprocessed, unlined, itchy wool. The kind that makes your skin consider leaving your body permanently. And no, you don't wear anything underneath. Underwear exists, in theory, but for most people, it's optional. And by optional, I mean missing. If you're lucky, you might have a linen under tunic. If you're not, it's just scratchy wool grinding directly against every part of your anatomy you wish to forget. The seams are hand-stitched, badly. The fabric is uneven, stiff, and dyed with whatever root or insect someone could find that week. It smells like damp sheep, smoke, and long-term suffering. Now, the fit. Imagine a rectangle with sleeves. That's your outfit. It's not tailored. It's not flattering. It's not even symmetrical. It is shapeless by design, so no one accuses you of vanity, which is a sin. Being attractive in public could get you judged, harassed, or accused of witchcraft. So better to just blend in as a moving bundle of wool and misery. As for footwear, don't get excited. If you have shoes, they're made of untreated leather. Thin, cracked, about as protective as a paper bag in a rainstorm. No insoles, no padding, no arch support, no laces. Just loosely stitched leather, vaguely resembling a shoe if you squint from a distance. They absorb water instantly and dry never. But most peasants don't have shoes. They walk barefoot, through mud, animal dung, sharp stones, ice, and occasionally fire, if a neighbor gets creative with burning trash. The skin on your feet becomes calloused enough to qualify as armor, but also frostbitten, because winter exists. Let's revisit the laundry situation. There's no soap. Not really. Maybe lye if you're near someone who makes it. But otherwise, your washing method involves cold water, ashes, a plank, and delusion. Hauling water from the stream, heating it, scrubbing the fabric by hand, wringing it out with fingers already chapped from frost and disease, then laying it out to dry in the sun, which visits your region exactly 3 days per year. Even if you did all of this, your clothes still aren't clean. They're just less offensive. And no, you can't afford to do this often, because you need that firewood for warmth, because your hands are cracked, because you're tired, and because no one else is doing it either. So everyone walks around wearing fabric soaked with months of sweat, smoke, animal hair, and possibly disease. Fleas live in your collar, lice live in your seams. Your tunic doesn't just touch your skin, it colonizes it, which brings us to the real fun. Skin problems. You itch. Constantly. Because medieval clothing is not breathable, washable, or comfortable. It's an ecosystem. Parasites, fungus, grime, all thriving together in one moist, scratchy, poorly stitched hellscape. You develop rashes. You scratch until you bleed. You wake up with bites and go to sleep with more. Your scalp flakes. Your armpits burn. Your thighs chafe. You want to scream, but instead you put on your tunic again, because that's the only option. Your clothes don't protect you from the elements. They trap them. Cold air seeps through. Rain soaks in. Heat builds up until your sweat boils under the wool, which then freezes the moment you step outside. You can't take it off. You have nowhere else to change. There's no privacy, no dressing room, no closet. Just you, your one outfit, and the cruel rotation of the seasons. And don't even think about tailoring. A needle costs more than your dignity. So you live, wrapped in wet wool and quiet desperation. Because in the Middle Ages, your clothing isn't fashion. It's punishment stitched into fabric. Next time you complain about a scratchy tag in your modern t-shirt, remember this. At least your shirt isn't plotting against your skin. It's morning in 1325, and you've just survived the medieval breakfast experience, which mostly involved chewing regret and drinking fermented despair. Now, logically, you might think it's time for a little dental hygiene, a refreshing brush, a cool rinse, a minty smile. But here's the catch. That concept doesn't exist. There is no toothbrush. There is no toothpaste. There is no dental floss, unless you count the rat hair stuck between your molars. And mouthwash? That would require both water safety and the existence of spearmint. So, what do? Well, you don't. If you're lucky or upper class or just obsessed with chewing on things, maybe you use a frayed twig to scrape around your teeth, or rinse with wine, or vinegar, or blessed holy water. None of these work, but they're better than the actual medieval dental toolkit, which is just pain. By your mid-20s, your smile is a historical crime scene. Cavities aren't an occasional issue, they're your oral lifestyle. Your gums are inflamed, your enamel is gone, your breath is legally a weapon, and the black spots on your teeth aren't coffee stains, they're rot, actual decay, literal decomposition happening inside your face, while everyone around you pretends this is fine, and it gets worse. Because sugar, though not widespread yet, is starting to appear, imported at a cost that could bankrupt a village. The rich have it. They put it in their food, their wine, their smug superiority, and it destroys their teeth faster than poverty ever could. You'd think nobles would have better smiles, but no, they just rot with more elegance. Now, if you're a peasant, congratulations. Your diet may be bland, but it saves you from sugar-induced mouth collapse. Instead, your dental enemies are bread made with sand, porridge with gravel, and meat so tough it could file your incisors into prison shivs. Every meal is a dental duel. Every chew is a gamble. And when the pain hits, and it will, your options for treatment are as follows. 1. Cry. 2. Pray. 3. Visit the barber surgeon. Yes, the same man who cuts your hair also performs surgery. Why? Because no one said this world made sense. The barber surgeon has tools, metal hooks, bone saws, dirty rags. He doesn't believe in germs because the concept doesn't exist yet. He believes in bloodletting and courage. You sit in his chair, a wooden stool, covered in someone else's dried screams, and you point to the offending tooth. He nods, sharpens something, and yanks it out of your skull while you grip the stool and try not to pass out. There is no anesthesia. There is no sedation. There is only noise. Your noise. And if you survive the extraction, great. Infection might still kill you. That's not a joke. A simple abscess, something we fix today with one trip to the pharmacy, can end you. Sepsis spreads. Fevers rise. You hallucinate. You vomit. You pray. Then you die. From a tooth. That's it. Your legacy? Death by molar. And let's talk social life. Forget dating apps. The dating process now is simple. Who owns land? Who owns a goat? Who still has more than 5 teeth? Your breath smells like fermented onions. Everyone's does. Halitosis is universal. And since kissing isn't a common custom, no one notices, or they do, but they can't do anything about it. So they pretend they don't. Romantic. In the Middle Ages, teeth are not your friends. They're time bombs. You don't clean them. You don't check them. You don't understand them. You just wait for the pain to start and hope it doesn't kill you. Modern toothpaste wouldn't just be a luxury. It would be considered witchcraft. A minty, foaming sorcery tube that makes your mouth feel clean? Burn the heretic. So, when you complain today about forgetting to floss, remember this. At least your teeth don't actively try to remove themselves from your head. At least you've never had to yank out a molar with pliers, rinse with wine, and go straight back to the fields. At least you're not medieval. Because in 1325, your smile isn't a reflection of your health. It's a countdown to your funeral. It's 6 a.m. in medieval Europe, and your spine already hurts. Not because you've done anything yet, but because existence itself is a physical burden. You've just survived your breakfast, if fermented paste and crusty bread shrapnel qualifies. and it's time to begin your workday, which is a generous word because this isn't really a day job. It's more of a lifelong unpaid internship with death as your final supervisor. You're a peasant, statistically speaking, which means your job is farming someone else's land with tools that haven't evolved since the Bronze Age, for a lord who doesn't know your name and wouldn't care if you spontaneously combusted while sowing barley. You rise with the sun and stop when the sun says so. There's no weekend. There's no sick day. There's no annual review unless you count winter killing your entire family and God deciding whether or not your soul is flammable. Most of your day involves dirt, digging in it, throwing seeds at it, dragging water across it, worrying it will flood or dry up or be claimed by a neighbor's goat. If you're lucky, you get an ox. If you're unlucky, you are the ox. Your tools include a wooden hoe, your hands, and a prayer. Your equipment is a tunic that hasn't been washed since the last plague and shoes made of raw regret. You do not work for a salary. You work for the chance to survive. You owe your lord crops, livestock, and several days of free labor during boon work, which is an adorably cruel term for forced labor that won't pay you but might keep you out of jail. The phrase, "don't work, don't eat," isn't a slogan here. It's a death sentence. If you break a bone, too bad. Splint it with a stick and keep digging. If you get an infection, drink beer and pray. If you die, your family will be fined for your absence. And if you try to leave, that's called vagrancy. That's illegal. Enjoy the stocks, or the lash, or being accused of witchcraft for wandering too far from your allotted patch of misery. Women don't get a pass. If you're a woman, your labor is simply doubled. You work in the fields and then go home to cook, clean, raise children, spin wool, patch your husband's lice-ridden tunic, and birth the next generation of tired peasants. Children? They start working around age 5. No toys, no school, just a wooden rake and the vague hope of not dying before puberty. Education is a rumor. Literacy is a crime against your station. Dreams are forbidden, and even imagination gets suspicious looks. If you're not farming, maybe you're a tanner, a blacksmith, a cooper, or a miller. Great. That means you spend your days breathing in toxic fumes, working next to open flames or animal guts, and losing digits to unregulated tools while earning slightly more than starvation. Guilds might help if you're in a town, but you're not. You're in a field, fighting weeds with your bare hands and hoping no one steals your only shirt. Your job title isn't farmer. It's biological engine for feudal economics. Your performance review comes in the form of famine, plague, or tax hikes. And there's no upward mobility. You do not become a merchant. You do not become a knight. You do not get promoted. You get arthritis. You get hunger. And then, if you're lucky, you get the flu and die before your teeth fall out again. Labor in the Middle Ages is not noble. It's not romantic. It's not character building. It's just slow, grinding attrition. Your body is your only tool, and it wears out by 30. But congratulations. You still have another 10 years before the village priest carves your coffin and tells your children to tithe harder. So grab your sickle. Ignore the pain in your joints. Smile with your 3 remaining teeth. And remember, your job in medieval Europe isn't about achievement. It's about enduring long enough for the next plague to notice you. In medieval Europe, the weather isn't just something you check before going outside. It's a full-time antagonist. A passive-aggressive force of nature that doesn't want to kill you quickly. It wants to slowly ruin everything you've ever built, grown, or hoped for. Your house isn't insulated. Your roof is made of straw, and your walls are made of wood, mud, or stones loosely stacked by someone who may or may not have understood the concept of a right angle. Rain doesn't politely knock. It leaks. Through everything. Your roof, your bed, your soul. In winter, the inside of your home is somehow colder than outside. There's no central heating, no chimney, just a smoky fire pit that fills the room with lung disease and barely thaws your toes. Your blankets are damp. Your clothes are damp. Your soul is damp. You don't complain because your tongue might freeze to your own teeth. Frostbite isn't diagnosed. It's just called, well, that hand's gone now. You huddle next to your family and livestock, all of you shivering like condemned prisoners trying to survive in a meat locker. In summer, the pendulum swings from frigid despair to full-body oven. Your home becomes a box of human stew. There's no breeze, no ventilation, no deodorant. You sweat through your wool, which chafes your skin into raw meat. But you can't strip down because modesty exists, and so do mosquitoes. Show too much skin, and you're either a sinner or a feast. Flies gather like old friends. They love your sweat. They love your food. They love your open wounds. There's no bug spray, just frantic hand-waving and quiet sobbing. Then there's the mud. Endless, clinging, soul-crushing mud. Spring doesn't bloom. It leaks. Everything turns to sludge. Fields, roads, shoes, and your dreams. And in dry seasons, the mud turns to dust. The dust gets in your eyes, in your lungs, in your bread. It becomes part of your identity. Occasionally, you get hailstorms that destroy crops, flash floods that wash away your only cow, or a lightning strike that sets the neighbor's haystack on fire, which then sets your haystack on fire. And guess what? That was your roof. Weather determines your fate. A late frost means starvation. A dry summer means your family eats turnip soup for 6 months and then dies anyway. No one asks how you're doing. They ask how the weather's doing because that's the only thing that decides whether this year is survivable or a footnote in a mass grave. And then there's wind, not a gentle breeze. Number. Wind in the Middle Ages is a personal insult. It tears off roofs, it kicks dust in your eyes, it whistles through your walls like a ghost that mocks your poverty. If you get a warm day, congratulations. That means the fleas are awake. The only thing worse than the weather is the fact that it never stops. It doesn't clock out. It doesn't apologize. It doesn't care that you're already sick, hungry, and wearing a tunic that smells like wet wool and despair. Weather in medieval Europe is a permanent feature of suffering. It doesn't just ruin your day, it defines your century. In the Middle Ages, water is not your friend. It's not refreshing. It's not pure. It's not flowing in from a tap at room temperature with a hint of lemon and a side of safety. It's a clear, deceptive liquid filled with betrayal. And depending on where you live, drinking it might be the fastest way to meet God, or at least the town gravedigger. The local stream, which seems picturesque in a painting, is actually a bubbling cesspool of everything that shouldn't be inside a human body. Dead animals, excrement, rotting food, and entire diseases use it as their daily commute. That crystal clear brook near your village? Upstream, someone's dumping a bucket of last night's digestive regrets directly into it. Because yes, toilets are just ideas and not actual infrastructure. Rainwater might sound safer, except it's been sitting in an open wooden barrel where insects breed, birds defecate, and small animals occasionally drown. So even if you collect it yourself, you're basically sipping a lukewarm cocktail called nature's roulette. Wells exist, but the deeper they are, the more likely they've been tainted by the leaky graveyard next door or the latrine pit dug without a map. Contamination is not a concept. They just call it bad luck and bury you quietly. So, what do you drink instead? Beer. Weak. Cloudy. Warm. Barely alcoholic beer. Not because it's trendy, not because you're throwing a 14th century brunch party, but because the brewing process involves boiling water, and boiling water kills some of the things trying to kill you. Children drink it. Pregnant women drink it. Old people drink it. Not because it's enjoyable, but because the alternative is internal bleeding, followed by a mysterious fever, and then darkness. If you're rich, maybe you drink imported wine. And by imported, we mean it's been dragged across miles of bad road in wooden barrels that may or may not have previously stored salted fish. Still safer than water. Bathing in water? Oh, you thought that was an option. Adorable. The prevailing belief is that bathing opens your pores to disease, so you don't wash regularly, and when you do, it's an event. a full production. You haul water from a river, boil it, pour it into a wooden tub, and then share it with 5 other people, starting with grandpa and ending with the baby. By the time it's your turn, the water is less a liquid and more a broth. Public bathhouses do exist, but they quickly gain reputations as dens of scandal, gossip, and impropriety. The church shuts most of them down, because cleanliness is next to sinfulness. Hygiene becomes a seasonal fantasy. So yes, water is necessary. You need it to live. You also need it to die, apparently. It's the thing you fear as much as famine. The thing that brings cholera, dysentery, and plagues disguised as refreshment. You sip cautiously, if at all, and when you survive the day, you don't thank hydration, you thank beer. In the Middle Ages, water doesn't quench your thirst. It sharpens your funeral plans. In the Middle Ages, medicine is not what you think it is. It's not clinical. It's not sterile. It's not based on anything we'd call science. It's closer to guessing with a knife. You don't get cured. You get challenged to survive. And if you're lucky, you die slowly enough to reconsider your life choices. Let's start with the core philosophy, the 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. These aren't metaphors. Medieval doctors believe your body is a leaky soup of these fluids, and any imbalance causes disease. Fever? Too much blood? Depression? Clearly too much black bile. Rash? Maybe you've angered your spleen. There is no germ theory, no bacteria, no understanding of infection. Disease is either divine punishment, bad air, or your moral failings seeping out through your skin. So how do they treat you? First, they drain you. Literally. Bloodletting is the go-to move for everything from headaches to heartbreak. Doctors open a vein and let it flow until you pass out, or the symptoms get bored and leave. Sometimes they use leeches. Sometimes they just use knives. Either way, you end up weaker and slightly more medieval than before. Got a cold? Try purging. Laxatives, emetics, enemas, anything to make your body expel something, preferably from both ends. Feeling sad? That's a spiritual issue. Better see a priest, or a barber, or both. Because yes, barbers are also surgeons. You can get your hair trimmed and your leg amputated in the same chair. Clean instruments? Number anesthesia? Never heard of it. Your best bet is to drink until you stop caring, or scream until your soul evacuates. Dentistry? That's not a profession. It's a punishment. A toothache means someone's yanking a molar out of your skull with pliers heated over a fire. There's no numbing, no hygiene, just the sounds of regret echoing through the village. Infections from these procedures? Constant, fatal, often, but that's just how the humours shake out. Surgery is usually worse than the illness. Broken bone? They'll reset it with a splint made from wood and hope it doesn't rot off. Wound? Cauterize it with a hot iron and pray your screams don't invite demons. Childbirth? It's less a medical event and more a gamble with death. No sanitation, no pain relief, no postnatal care. If you survive, you're a miracle. If not, you're a statistic. And let's talk about hospitals. If you think they're clean sanctuaries of care, think again. They're often just repurposed monasteries, where you lie in a room full of other people, also dying, also untreated, and also very contagious. The staff? Mostly monks and nuns, guided by piety more than practice. Prayer is the main treatment, so is isolation. If you show signs of the plague, they wall you up in your house and call it containment. And yes, that actually happened. Medicine in the Middle Ages isn't about healing, it's about survival. If the disease doesn't kill you, the cure might. If the cure doesn't kill you, the doctor might. If the doctor doesn't kill you, then congratulations, you've successfully avoided the health system, which is the most medically sound decision you could have made. In medieval Europe, religion is not just a belief system, it is your calendar, your legal code, your health plan, your social network, and your only hope of not roasting eternally in the afterlife. There's no such thing as separation of church and state because the church is the state. The church tells you when to pray, when to eat, when to fast, when to have sex, when not to, and whether your left eye twitch means divine punishment or demonic possession. Your local priest has more power over your life than any noble or king, and he knows it. He also knows your secrets, because confession is mandatory, weekly, and if you forget to show up, that's a sin. Miss Mass? Sin. Think impure thoughts about the blacksmith's daughter? Double sin. Laugh during a funeral? Sin. Eat meat on a Friday? Sin. And possibly heresy, depending on your tone. Speaking of heresy, that's the medieval word for having your own opinion, and it's punishable by death. Not a quick death. A public, humiliating, exemplary one. Fire is the preferred method. Burning someone alive has a satisfying finality and a handy symbolic message. Do not question doctrine. Literacy is limited to the clergy and a few nobles. The Bible is written in Latin, which you can't read. This is not an accident. The church doesn't want you interpreting scripture. That's their job. You're supposed to absorb whatever filtered truth your priest decides you deserve, usually laced with heavy reminders about hell. And what is hell? A very real place, described in painstaking detail by men who seem almost too excited about it. Rivers of fire, demons with pitchforks, eternal screaming. Basically, a nightmare vacation brochure handed out every Sunday to keep you morally terrified. Church bells mark your day. You wake up to them. You work by them. You pray when they ring. They are your medieval clock. But instead of minutes and hours, they count sins and regrets. And tithes. Let's not forget those. You owe 10% of your income to the church. That's mandatory. It doesn't matter if your harvest failed, your chickens died, or you're down to your last crust of rat-nibbled bread. God still wants his cut. And by God, we mean the local monastery. Holidays are called holy days, and they aren't about joy. They're about guilt, fasting, and processions in which you drag a wooden cross through mud while chanting in Latin and wondering why your feet are bleeding. Women fare even worse. The church teaches that Eve ruined everything, and that every woman carries a little bit of that original sin. If you're outspoken, unmarried, or own a cat, congratulations. You're probably a witch. The church doesn't just run your village, it runs your mind. It teaches you to fear questioning, to mistrust pleasure, and to see suffering as a noble, even holy, experience. In this world, pain is purification, and joy is suspicious. If you're smiling, the priest is already watching. So no, religion in the Middle Ages is not a personal journey. It's an institutional monopoly on your soul, and it never takes a day off. In medieval Europe, being born female is not a quirky challenge. It's a full-blown hard mode with no cheat codes and the game designer actively rooting for your early demise. From the moment you arrive screaming into a lice-infested straw cradle, your path is carved in stone. Marry young, bear children until it kills you, obey your husband, and die quietly, preferably with a prayer on your lips and no opinions in your head. Your value is tied to 3 things: your womb, your silence, and your ability to churn butter while pretending not to notice your husband's fleas. Education? Only if you're noble. And even then, it's Latin prayers and embroidery, not logic or law. Intellectual ambition in a woman is treated like demonic possession with better posture. Most girls are betrothed by 12, married by 14, and pregnant by 15. Love is not part of the equation. It's about alliances, livestock, and which noble cousin needs a wife who won't argue. Your consent is assumed. Your opinion is irrelevant. Once married, you legally become an extension of your husband, like a walking apron with reproductive functionality. Your job is to produce sons, keep the fire lit, and never complain, unless you want to be labelled a nag, or worse, a witch. And yes, that's a real risk. Women who speak too much, know too much, or just look a little too suspicious on a Tuesday are frequently accused of witchcraft. Herbal knowledge? Witch. Talking back? Witch. owning a cat. Triple witch. Punishment ranges from public shaming to execution, usually by drowning, hanging, or burning, depending on the town's aesthetic preferences. Childbirth is a recurring game of Russian roulette. There's no prenatal care, no anesthesia, and no sterile anything. Your midwife is doing her best, but even minor complications can mean death for you, the baby, or both. If you survive, congratulations. You get to go right back to farming, nursing, scrubbing, and pretending the sound in your pelvis isn't internal screaming. If you're unmarried, you're a problem. If you're widowed, you're vulnerable. If you're both, society doesn't know what to do with you, so it calls you suspicious and pushes you to a convent or the stake. And yes, even nuns don't get off easy. They live under strict rules, constant supervision, and spiritual inferiority. No matter how devout, they're always considered lesser beings, holier than peasants, but still a solid rung below the lowest monk. There is no winning strategy here. You are expected to suffer quietly, serve endlessly, and endure invisibly. If you laugh too loud, cry too long, or think too much, you're a disruption. And if you dare to live outside the script, if you try to lead, heal, learn, or question, you're a danger to the system. So yes, being a woman in medieval Europe isn't a subplot. It's a survival horror campaign with no save points. Your body is a battleground. Your rights are theoretical. Your freedom is decorative. And your death is usually sooner rather than later. Welcome to life as a woman in the Middle Ages. Game over. Try again never. In medieval Europe, diplomacy is a word for monks and fiction. The default communication style between humans, lords, serfs, siblings, and sometimes livestock is violence. Petty, brutal, and often public violence. Arguments aren't settled with logic or reasoned debate. They're settled with fists, clubs, or flaming pitchforks. If that fails, there's always the local constable with a bigger stick. The legal system, if you can call it that, isn't about justice. It's about spectacle. If you steal a loaf of bread, you're not fined. You're branded, mutilated, or strung up in the town square while your neighbors cheer between mouthfuls of turnip soup. Gossip too much? Meet the scold's bridle, a metal cage that forces silence by driving a bar into your mouth. It's not fashion forward, but it does make you reconsider speaking ever again. Accused of lying? Say goodbye to your tongue. Accused of theft? That's one hand down, one reminder left. If you're facing a serious charge like heresy or witchcraft, you're in for a fun little exercise called trial by ordeal, which means you'll either be boiled, burned, drowned, or maimed until someone arbitrarily decides you've been sufficiently tested by God. Put your hand in boiling water. If it heals in 3 days, you're innocent. If it doesn't, you're guilty, and probably already infected. Drown. If you float, you're a witch. If you sink, congratulations. You're pure, but also dead. Domestic violence isn't just tolerated. It's practically written into the family instruction manual. Husbands are not only allowed to discipline their wives and children, they're expected to. It's called maintaining order. The line between household and battlefield is razor thin. Meanwhile, public executions are the closest thing to entertainment. Everyone shows up. Kids, old people, wandering dogs, hangings, beheadings, burnings, disembowelments. It's less about crime prevention and more about making sure the population stays terrified. The nobles, they have their own version. Duels, feuds, castle sieges, poisonings at feasts. A simple disagreement over land boundaries can escalate into generational vendettas where everyone loses and the local population is reduced by half. And if there's a crusade or a border skirmish, that's a bonus opportunity for mass violence, with religious justification and matching banners. Violence isn't a breakdown of the system. It is the system. There are no social safety nets, no police reports, no peacekeeping missions. There's just the strong, the desperate, and the heavily armed. In medieval Europe, civility is a luxury no one can afford. If you want something, you take it. If you disagree, you fight. If you lose, you suffer. If you win, you rule until someone bigger stabs you in your sleep. It's less civilization and more chaos with a candle on top. So remember, back then, every argument was potentially fatal, every neighbor a threat, and every glance an invitation to duel. You weren't just surviving the weather and the plague, you were surviving each other. In medieval Europe, death wasn't a surprise guest. It was a full-time roommate. You didn't pass away peacefully in your sleep at 92 surrounded by loved ones. You coughed once at 26 and were buried by sundown. The average life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40 years. But that number is hilariously optimistic, because it includes the 50% of children who never made it past their 5th birthday. Infant mortality wasn't a concern, it was a calendar event. If you survived past childhood, you didn't celebrate. You braced for the next round. Disease, famine, childbirth, raiders, poorly constructed ladders, and that one chicken with a grudge. Death came from everywhere. You could die from the plague, from spoiled food, from stepping on a rusty nail, or from looking at a noble the wrong way. Sometimes all four at once. Medical care was optimistic bleeding or herbal guesswork. If your leg broke, your best-case scenario was amputation by someone whose last patient was a pig. If you had a toothache, the barber surgeon would yank it with pliers and then recommend prayer. If you gave birth, it was basically Russian roulette with infection. Women weren't expected to survive more than a few pregnancies. Many didn't survive one. In fact, childbirth was a leading cause of death for women, and the lucky ones who lived, back to the fields by next week. For men, life was equally lethal. You worked until your spine turned into gravel, and when you finally slowed down, disease or injury took care of the rest. You didn't retire. You stopped moving, and that was that. Even your final resting place wasn't guaranteed. If the graveyard was full, congratulations. You got stacked or replaced. There was no embalming, no eternal rest. Just a hole, some prayers, and dirt. And if a war or plague came through, your body might be dumped in a pit with 40 others. Mourning rituals were short. No one had time for grief when the pig needed feeding and the roof was leaking. Life was too exhausting to indulge in prolonged sorrow, and spiritually, death was just the beginning. The church promised fire, demons, purgatory, and possibly some singing angels, depending on how well you tithed. So no, dying young wasn't a tragedy. It was the norm. If you made it to 50, you were a local legend. If you made it to 60, people suspected you were a witch. And if you dared reach 70, the priest started asking pointed questions. In short, the Middle Ages weren't about living your best life. They were about trying not to die by lunchtime. Every breath was borrowed. Every step was a gamble. You didn't fear death. You expected it. Congratulations. You've made it through a full medieval day. You've endured hunger, parasites, damp wool, dental trauma, and spiritual surveillance. You haven't been executed, drowned, or mysteriously vanished for offending the local baron's horse. By the standards of the 14th century, this is considered a massive personal victory. But let's pause. In the modern world, winning usually implies something better than simply not dying. You survive, and then maybe upgrade your phone, learn Italian, or retire in comfort. In the Middle Ages, surviving wasn't the beginning of a journey. It was the whole plot. You lived long enough to wake up sore and terrified again tomorrow. That was your prize. You didn't climb a ladder of ambition. You clung to a muddy rung and hoped the plague didn't shake it loose. Your survival meant going to bed in the same flea-ridden straw pile, in the same wooden hovel, with the same 6 people breathing in your face, hoping your one bowl of gruel didn't ferment overnight. There's no career progression, no vacation, no spa day, no savings account. There's just repetition, cold, and prayers. If you were exceptionally lucky, you might someday own a second pair of shoes, but don't count on it. And even if you managed to beat the odds, lived to see your children survive childhood, paid your tithes, avoided arrest, and maintained all your limbs. You were still a subject in a system that would never acknowledge you. No statues, no songs, no legacy. Your name, if remembered at all, would be scratched into a stone a sheep might relieve itself on. So yes, you survived, but did you win? Only if you redefine winning as not being dead yet. Which, to be fair, was a popular metric at the time. You didn't aim for happiness. You aimed for not dying of soup. And by those rules, sure, you're a champion. Just don't expect a trophy. Expect more lice. And just like that, it's over. You open your eyes, and you're not in a damp hut. You're not clutching a straw pillow stuffed with existential dread. The air doesn't smell like fermented goat and theological guilt. Your teeth hurt, yes, but only because you grind them in your sleep over bills, not because your barber accidentally extracted your soul during a molar removal. Congratulations, you've returned to the modern world, a place where tap water won't kill you, where bathing doesn't require theological debate, and where breakfast doesn't involve a moral crisis and a turnip. Your mattress remembers you, your toilet flushes, your clothes don't bleed dye or harbour livestock, your toothbrush exists, antibiotics exist, feminism exists, human rights, controversial in execution, but at least conceptualized, exist. You're alive in a time where the worst day still statistically outranks the best day of most of human history. But before you celebrate, let's not romanticize the present too quickly. You now possess the inescapable knowledge that survival used to be measured in hours, not hopes. That most of your ancestors didn't dream, they endured. And yet, through disease, feudalism, bad hygiene, and worse leadership, they didn't vanish. Somehow, miraculously, they made it just long enough for you to exist. So what do you do now? Modern survivor of an imaginary medieval excursion? Maybe nothing. Maybe just sit with the thought that you're the endpoint of thousands of years of people who never got a day off, who never had time to ask why, because how was already too exhausting. And maybe tonight, when you brush your teeth with mint-flavored foam and set your alarm on a glowing rectangle, you'll whisper a quiet thank you to the past for crawling, bleeding, scratching, and surviving its way into your future. You wake up. You're home. Welcome back. Try not to complain about the Wi-Fi